The shuttle slid smoothly into the docking bay of Axiom Academy, leaving a faint trail of ionized air behind it. Inside, Captain Mira Hale tightened her grip on the straps of her travel pack. The shuttle had been quiet, and the journey long, but now the vast structure of the Academy towered over her like a monument to power and skill. Mira was human, and humans were rare in this Academy. The other species, taller, faster, and stranger in appearance, usually looked down on humans. To most of them, humans were fragile, simple, and lacking in advanced tools. Mira, however, had a reputation back home. She was clever, quick, and fearless. And she had something that no machine or armor could replicate: instinct. As the shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, Mira stepped out. The hangar was filled with students, already moving toward the main academy. Some wore flowing cloaks, others had armored suits, and a few even floated slightly above the ground with anti-gravity boots. Mira's uniform was simple: a reinforced human suit, and strapped across her back. Instantly, eyes turned. Whispers traveled in waves. One student, a tall, four-armed alien with iridescent skin, pointed at her sword and snickered. Another, a small creature with translucent wings, murmured something in a language Mira didn't understand. She ignored them. She walked forward, her steps steady, her head high. She had been through tough drills, hostile planets, and missions that tested her every skill. A little doubt from alien students would not shake her. At the entrance, a voice boomed over the Academy's PA system. "Welcome new recruits to Axiom Academy. Prepare for orientation." Mira moved with the crowd into a massive hall where students were already gathering. Some were chatting in their alien languages. Others were examining the weapons and gadgets laid out for demonstration. She noticed a line of energy swords humming softly in a display case. She smiled slightly, but did not approach. Her eyes kept returning to her own steel sword on her back. It was simple, old-fashioned even, but it had never failed her. A sharp voice cut through the noise. "New human? Step forward." Mira turned and saw a tall figure with gray, scaled skin and golden eyes. This was Instructor Tovar, the Academy's veteran trainer. His reputation preceded him. He was strict, experienced, and respected by all species. Few had ever questioned his authority. End quote. Mira stepped forward calmly. Tovar's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "You carry a steel sword?" His voice was a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "Do you not know that plasma weapons can melt steel in an instant?" Mira nodded once, without speaking. She had heard similar comments before. Tovar laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that made several students glance nervously at him. "I see. You think your old-fashioned human tools can survive modern energy weapons? Very well. We shall see." He motioned for the class to follow him. The hall emptied into a training arena, a large circular room with walls that could shift and project holographic targets. Drones hovered in the air, glowing with energy cores, ready for demonstrations. "Today," Tovar began, "you will witness why tradition cannot compete with modern technology. Energy shields, plasma swords, and adaptive armor. These are the tools of victory. Steel, wood, or any other primitive metal will not save you." He paused, glancing at Mira. "And yet, I see one human here who insists on carrying that." He gestured to her sword. The class chuckled, some students whispering, others pointing. Mira's expression did not change. Tovar continued. "We begin with orientation drills. You will see the weapons, learn the techniques, and understand why humans are often unprepared in the galaxy's larger conflicts." The first drill involved plasma targets projected in the arena. Each student took turns approaching the drones, which fired brief, harmless pulses of plasma. The others moved with agility, deflecting the light streams with energy shields or swords made from advanced alloys. Mira watched carefully. When it was her turn, a few students laughed under their breaths. She stepped into the arena, holding her steel sword firmly. The first plasma pulse shot toward her. She did not flinch. She raised her sword not to block directly, but to angle it slightly. The plasma hit the steel at a glancing angle and dispersed into a harmless spark. The class gasped. Tovar raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Mira continued, moving with a rhythm that surprised everyone. She did not rely on strength or shields. She relied on timing, precision, and intuition. Each pulse that could have burned through her sword slid off harmlessly when she redirected it with careful angles. By the end, she had passed the drill without injury. Some students whispered to each other, "Impossible. She's human." She used steel and survived. Tovar's voice finally broke the murmurs. "Interesting," he said. "Perhaps humans are not as defenseless as I assumed. But do not think this will be easy. This is only the beginning." After the drills, Mira walked through the academy's corridors. Statues of great warriors lined the walls, some human, but mostly alien. She felt a pang of pride. Humans were rarely recognized in these halls, but she was determined to change that. She reached her dormitory, a modest room with a bed, storage, and a training mat. Sitting on the bed, she removed her gloves and examined her sword. It was simple steel, without energy enhancement or alloy reinforcement. Yet, she trusted it. It had been with her through every skirmish, every mission. It was an extension of herself. As she prepared for rest, Mira reflected on the day. The academy was different from anything she had faced. Other students relied on tech, on armor, on the assumption that they were invincible. Mira relied on her mind, her instincts, and her skill. She trained herself mentally, going over strategies and imagining scenarios where plasma attacks came from all directions. She knew she would be tested not just in drills, but in real challenges designed to push each student to their limits. Later that evening, she heard faint sounds in the corridor outside her room. A small group of students was practicing near the training area. They were clearly curious about the human who carried a steel sword. Mira smiled to herself. They would learn soon enough that humans were unpredictable. And unpredictability could be more powerful than any energy weapon. Before sleep, Mira stood by the window, looking at the vast expanse outside the academy. Stars sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Beyond those stars were countless planets, conflicts, and civilizations. She had a place in this galaxy. And she intended to prove that humans were not weak or simple. They were adaptable, clever, and unyielding. Somewhere, Instructor Tovar would likely watch and laugh again, saying, "You cannot block plasma with steel." Mira clenched her fists, smiling. When the time came, she would show him that humans could do exactly that, and more. As sleep overtook her, she held her sword close, imagining the challenges ahead. She did not fear the plasma, the aliens, or the drills. She had trained her mind and body, and she knew one truth that few others did. Courage and ingenuity could overcome even the most advanced technology. The next day would bring new trials, new challenges, and new doubts from the academy students. But Mira was ready. She was human, and humans thrived in impossible situations. She would not only survive Axiom Academy, she would leave her mark. And somewhere deep in the hall of instructors, Tovar's laughter echoed, unaware that a human was about to challenge everything he thought he knew about combat, steel, and courage. The next morning, the academy's corridors buzzed with energy. Students from every corner of the galaxy hurried toward the training arenas. Mira walked calmly, her steel sword strapped to her back. Other students glanced at her, whispering among themselves. "Still carrying that old thing?" a tall alien with 4 arms asked, smirking. Mira offered a polite nod, but said nothing. Words were unnecessary. Today, Her skills would speak for themselves. The arena was massive, circular, with walls that could shift into various terrains. Platforms rose and fell. Holographic trees, rocks, and structures created a simulated battlefield. Hovering drones lined the edges, each loaded with plasma emitters capable of firing pulses with pinpoint precision. At the center, Instructor Tovar waited. His scales glimmered under the lights. "Today," he began, "you will participate in the combat simulation test. This is your first trial, designed to push every student to the edge of their abilities. Only those who adapt will survive the arena." Several students muttered anxiously. The simulation was famous for being difficult, even for elite trainees. Tovar scanned the room, stopping at Mira. "Human," he said, voice firm. "You will face the same test. Keep in mind, energy shields and plasma blades give you protection that your primitive steel cannot." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Do not expect mercy." Mira simply nodded. She had no illusions. She had no shield, no advanced weapon, just her sword and her wits. That was enough. The simulation began. A holographic signal activated the drones, which floated into precise positions. The arena walls shifted, creating narrow corridors and open spaces. Students were called one by one to face their first challenge. The first alien trainee, a towering being with crystalline armor, stepped forward. Drones fired simultaneously, and the student raised a shimmering energy shield. Plasma pulses bounced harmlessly off, leaving a trail of glowing sparks. The crowd cheered. Mira watched carefully. She noticed how the student relied entirely on the shield. Movements were stiff. Reactions were mechanical. It was impressive, but predictable. When it was her turn, whispers ran through the arena. "She has no shield," some said. "How can she even survive?" "Well," Mira stepped forward. Her boots clicked against the metal floor. She felt the tension of all eyes on her. A drone fired its first pulse of plasma. Mira did not flinch. She lifted her steel sword at a slight angle. The plasma hit the blade and slid off harmlessly, creating a flash of light that drew gasps from the onlookers. The next pulse came from a different angle. Mira shifted her stance, moving gracefully, her sword intercepting the energy at a perfect trajectory. She did not try to block the plasma directly. Instead, she redirected it, using angles and timing to dissipate the force. A third pulse came, faster than the others. Mira spun, sword glinting in the artificial sunlight of the simulation. The plasma glanced off, harmlessly striking the arena wall. The other students stared, wide-eyed. Even the instructor paused, a hint of surprise on his face. "You are fast," Tovar said, voice low, almost to himself. Mira moved through the arena with precision. Every pulse that could have burned through her sword slid away. She did not rush. She waited, measured each strike, and reacted with exact timing. Every motion was purposeful. The final wave of plasma came. 3 drones fired at once, forming a triangular pattern. Mira's heart beat steadily, but her mind was clear. She angled her sword diagonally, stepping to the side. 2 pulses glanced off, harmless. The third barely touched the blade, fizzing into sparks. The arena fell silent. Mira lowered her sword. Not a single plasma pulse had struck her directly. Some of the alien students whispered in disbelief. It's impossible. How did she do that? How did she do that?" Tovar walked forward, his golden eyes fixed on her. "Interesting," he said. "You survived without an energy shield or plasma weapon. But do not assume this was skill alone. You were lucky." Mira met his gaze calmly. "It was not luck, instructor. I studied the angles, the timing, and the patterns. That is how humans survive impossible situations." The crowd murmured. This human, they realized, was not ordinary. After the test, the students returned to the academy halls for debriefing. Some students were quietly critical, others curious. Mira listened politely as Tovar explained the physics behind plasma, energy shields, and why traditional metals could not endure the force. You survived this test, Tovar said. But survival is not enough. You must adapt, learn, and overcome. A sword cannot block plasma. But you... He paused, glancing at Mira. You may have something worth studying. Mira smiled faintly. She did not boast, but inside, a spark of satisfaction burned. She had proven that human skill and intelligence could overcome assumptions about weakness. After the briefing, Mira returned to her dormitory. The other students, some still whispering, avoided her. Some were envious. Others were curious. Mira unpacked her sword and laid it carefully on the training mat. She had learned from the test that her instincts were strong, but refinement was necessary. The drones had fired in predictable patterns. In real combat, unpredictability would come from opponents who could change attacks in ways drones could not. She needed to anticipate, adapt, and move faster. She spent the next hours practicing alone, running drills in her mind and testing angles with her sword. She imagined multiple plasma pulses from different directions, turning, sliding, pivoting. Her movements became smoother, more fluid. Each swing was precise, each motion calculated to minimize risk. By the time the sun set in the Academy's artificial sky, Mira had trained herself beyond exhaustion. She sat on the mat, breathing heavily, but with a sense of satisfaction. She had not only survived the first test, she had begun to understand the rules of this new battlefield. Later, as she walked toward the dormitory cafeteria, a small group of students approached. They were not aggressive, but curious. "How do you do it?" asked a student with shimmering silver skin. "No shield, no plasma weapon, and yet you survived the drones." Mira shrugged lightly. "You watch. You think. You adapt. It is not the weapon that wins the fight. It is the mind behind it." Some students nodded slowly, others looked skeptical. But a few had a glimmer of respect in their eyes. For the first time, humans were not just seen as fragile, they were resourceful, clever, and dangerous in unexpected ways. That night, as Mira lay in her bed, she reflected on the day. The Academy had underestimated her. They assumed humans were weak because of appearances and technology. They did not understand that humans thrived on creativity, instinct, and courage. She closed her eyes, thinking about the challenges ahead. There would be more tests, more simulations, more scrutiny. The Academy was full of beings who had relied on technology for centuries. Mira had relied on herself, and so far, it had been enough. Somewhere in the Academy halls, Instructor Tovar's voice echoed again, though she could not hear the exact words. His skepticism lingered like a shadow. She smiled faintly, imagining him repeating, "You cannot block plasma with steel." Tomorrow, Mira knew, would bring the real challenges. Drones were predictable. Other students were cautious. Soon, she would face simulations and opponents who could think, adapt, and strike in ways that machines could not. But Mira was ready. Humans were not built to follow patterns, they were built to break them. And in this academy, in this galaxy filled with powerful aliens and advanced technology, humans had a place, even if the galaxy itself refused to see it at first. Mira's sword rested beside her bed, simple and steel, but more than a weapon, it was a symbol of her determination. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult. She knew the Academy would test her at every step. Yet she was confident in one truth. Skill, courage, and intelligence could overcome the strongest assumptions. And Mira Hale, Human among aliens would prove it. The first test was over. The real challenge had just begun. The academy was quiet at night, the corridors glowing with soft, artificial lights. Most students rested after the day's grueling tests, but Mira Hale was already awake, her mind and body refusing to rest. She walked to the training hall, a massive space filled with holographic projections, practice dummies, and empty exercise areas. Tonight, she trained alone. Her steel sword felt heavy across her back, yet familiar. It had been with her through countless missions and drills back on Earth, and it would serve her here as well. She had survived the first test, but the combat simulation test had revealed something important. Drones were predictable. Real opponents would not be. Mira began by moving through simple drills. Footwork first. Step, pivot, sidestep. She imagined plasma strikes coming from multiple angles, forcing herself to anticipate each one. The hall echoed with the swish of her sword, a sound that was steady, controlled, and purposeful. After footwork, she practiced angles. She remembered how the plasma from the drones in the previous test had slid off her blade when she positioned it correctly. That principle was simple. Energy could not be blocked head-on, but it could be redirected, dissipated, or avoided entirely. Every motion mattered, and every angle could make the difference between survival and failure. Hours passed, and Mira's body began to tire, but she did not stop. She experimented with different stances, testing how her sword could interact with plasma pulses from various directions. Sometimes she spun, sometimes she dropped low, letting the energy glance harmlessly off the blade. She visualized alien combatants, imagining unpredictable attacks, and adjusted her movements accordingly. It was not just physical training. Mira studied the physics behind the plasma. She recalled what instructor Tovar had said. Plasma weapons were unstoppable by ordinary metals. But she had also noticed that plasma lost energy when deflected at sharp angles, or when it hit surfaces that were not directly opposing it. Using a small, portable analyzer, she tested her sword against controlled energy bursts. Sparks flew, and the steel glowed faintly. But it did not melt. She had coated the blade with a thin, heat-resistant layer she had crafted before arriving at the academy, a simple solution that no one expected, but one that could absorb a small fraction of heat and prevent the steel from weakening. It was a human touch, in a hall full of alien technology. As Mira trained, she realized something important. Humans had adaptability. Aliens relied on advanced weapons, energy shields, and known techniques. They were excellent at following protocols, reacting to threats as they had been trained. Humans, on the other hand, could think creatively, improvise, and respond in unpredictable ways. That advantage had to be honed, or it would be wasted. A soft sound alerted Mira. She glanced up and saw a few other students watching quietly from the shadows. One had shimmering silver skin. Another had small, floating orbs circling them. They were curious, not mocking. "Why do you keep training alone?" one asked, stepping closer cautiously. Mira lowered her sword. "Because learning from drones is different from learning from people," she said simply. "I need to adapt. You cannot rely on patterns alone. You must anticipate what is not shown to you." The students exchanged glances. One whispered, "She might be something else, a human who thinks differently." Mira smiled faintly. She did not need allies, but she appreciated the attention. Respect, she knew, was earned not through words, but through action and skill. After the others left, Mira returned to her training. She began practicing rapid sequences, imagining multiple plasma strikes in quick succession. She moved faster than before, testing her reactions, learning the rhythm of defense and attack. Each motion was deliberate, each decision calculated. Next, she practiced precision strikes. She knew that in real combat, a human might not be able to survive, relying only on defense. Sometimes, Offense was necessary. A well-timed counterattack could disrupt even the most advanced alien opponent. She swung her sword at holographic targets with pinpoint accuracy, striking vital points, imagining disarming moves, and practicing transitions between defense and attack. Hours turned into the deep night, and Mira finally paused, leaning against a wall to catch her breath. She examined her hands and sword. There were small burns on the blade's edge from deflecting simulated plasma bursts. But the weapon was intact. Her body ached. But her mind was sharp. This was the human method. Study, adapt, anticipate, and execute. Not relying on gadgets, not depending on shields, but on instinct, intelligence, and creativity. That method had kept humans alive in countless conflicts across their home planet, and now it would prove itself in the Academy. The next morning, Mira awoke early, her muscles stiff but her determination strong. Today was different. Today, she would observe her peers during training. While the other students trained in groups, wielding energy shields and plasma weapons, Mira moved quietly along the edges, noting patterns, habits, and weaknesses. She noticed one thing immediately. Aliens relied heavily on their technology. Shields were strong, but predictable. Plasma weapons were deadly, but their firing patterns were calculated. Those who relied solely on their gadgets rarely moved outside the expected sequences. Humans, she realized, could exploit that. During a sparring session, Mira stepped in. One student, confident in their plasma sword, attacked with fast strikes. Mira moved calmly, her steel sword glinting. She did not try to block the attacks head-on. Instead, she angled, redirected, and sidestepped. The plasma glanced off her blade harmlessly, and with a quick maneuver, she disarmed the opponent with a simple but effective technique. A small crowd had gathered. They whispered, amazed at what they saw. A human, with nothing but a steel sword, had outmaneuvered a student armed with advanced plasma technology. Tovar, watching from the sidelines, frowned slightly. He had not expected humans to excel in combat at this level. Interesting, he muttered, jotting notes. Mira returned to the sidelines, letting the opponent recover. Adaptation is key, she said quietly, to anyone who asked. You cannot rely only on what your weapon can do. You must think, anticipate, and respond. Some students nodded, others remained skeptical. But a few, quietly, began to observe her method, practicing the angles and timing she demonstrated without even realizing it. That afternoon, Mira found a quiet corner of the Academy's library. She studied combat manuals, not just for humans, but for alien species as well. She wanted to understand how others fought, how they moved, and where their weaknesses might lie. Humans had ingenuity, yes, but knowledge was power. By learning alien techniques, she could combine instinct with strategy. Her studies revealed patterns. Many alien species relied on linear attacks. Some were fast, some strong, but most were predictable. Humans, however, excelled in creativity and problem-solving under pressure. Mira realized that her advantage was not only in her skill with a sword, it was in her ability to think differently. That evening, she returned to the training hall for more practice. The hall was empty again. Mira ran drills, combining everything she had learned. Angles, speed, precision, anticipation, and improvisation. She imagined facing multiple opponents, each with unpredictable attacks. Her steel sword became an extension of her body, responding instinctively to imagined threats. By the end of the night, Mira was exhausted, yet satisfied. She had refined her technique, strengthened her instincts, and prepared her mind for the challenges ahead. The Academy might underestimate humans, but she would not. As she walked back to her dormitory, She glanced at the stars visible through the massive windows. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, and full of opponents who believed themselves superior. But humans had survived worse. Humans had adapted to the harshest conditions, the deadliest opponents, and the most impossible situations. And Mira Hale would carry that legacy forward, not with technology, not with energy shields, but with skill, courage, and the human mind. She returned to her room, placing her sword carefully beside her bed. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and new observers. But Mira was ready. She had discovered the human method, a way to survive, adapt, and excel where others relied only on power. Somewhere in the academy, Instructor Tovar's voice echoed in her memory. "You cannot block plasma with steel." Mira smiled faintly. Soon, he would see that humans could do more than block. They could adapt, redirect, and overcome. The human method was simple, yet powerful. Observe, anticipate, and act. And Mira Hale, standing alone among the galaxy's most skilled warriors, was learning to master it. The sun of Axiom Academy's artificial sky rose slowly, casting long shadows across the sprawling training arenas. Today was not an ordinary training day. Today was the Plasma Gauntlet. Mira Hale walked through the corridors, her steel sword strapped to her back. She felt calm, focused, and ready. Over the past days, she had trained alone, observed her peers, and studied combat patterns. Now, all that preparation would be tested. The arena was massive, circular, and intimidating. Holographic walls displayed shifting environments. Rocky crags, narrow corridors, and open fields. At the center hovered dozens of plasma drones, their glowing cores pulsing with lethal energy. This was the most feared test in the academy. No student had ever completed it without relying on an energy shield. Students gathered on the sidelines, whispering nervously. Mira noticed the same curious glances she had seen before. This time, though, there was tension. Some whispered, "She cannot survive this." Others muttered, "Perhaps humans are more dangerous than we thought." Instructor Tovar stood at the arena's edge, his golden eyes fixed on Mira. "Human," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This is the Plasma Gauntlet. Energy shields are the norm here. You do not have one. If you attempt this, know that failure is certain. You will be burned, your sword will fail, and you will learn your limits." Mira lifted her head and met his gaze. Tovar's lips curved into a faint smile. "Very well. Step forward." Mira walked into the arena, feeling the eyes of every student on her. The air was thick with tension. She raised her steel sword, feeling its weight, its balance, and the history it carried. Every strike, every move, had been honed over hours of practice. The first drones activated. They fired plasma pulses in rapid succession, faster than anything she had faced before. Most students would have panicked. Mira did not. She adjusted her stance, angling her blade. The first pulses struck the steel and slid off harmlessly. Sparks flew, illuminating her determined face. The drones fired again, this time from multiple directions. Mira moved swiftly, pivoting, sliding, and angling her sword to redirect the plasma. Each movement was precise, calculated to dissipate the energy. The air sizzled with heat and light, yet she remained unharmed. The crowd gasped. Whispers spread quickly. "How is she doing this? It's impossible. Ever? 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 Ever?" Tovar watched carefully, his golden eyes narrowing. He had trained hundreds of students, but Mira's method was unusual. She did not rely on strength, shields, or advanced technology. She relied on timing, angles, and human ingenuity. The drones increased their speed. Pulses fired almost simultaneously from above, below, and the sides. Mira dropped into a low stance, letting a plasma strike glance off her blade, and hit the arena wall. She spun, slashing at holographic targets mid-motion, her movements fluid and instinctive. Some drones attempted to corner her. She did not panic. She remembered her training: anticipate, redirect, and move unpredictably. She leaped over a plasma strike, landing on a raised platform. Another drone fired, but she tilted her blade at just the right angle. The energy slid off, harmlessly dissipating in sparks. Mira's confidence grew with each successful maneuver. She realized something important. Her human method was working against technology and speed that most students could not match. While aliens relied on shields and firepower, she relied on creativity, instinct, and adaptability. That combination was unpredictable. That combination was human. Halfway through the gauntlet, the arena walls shifted, creating a narrow canyon. Drones fired from multiple angles, forcing Mira to move quickly and decisively. One drone fired a rapid burst, aiming to catch her off guard. Mira pivoted, angling her sword, and the plasma slid along the blade, leaving her unharmed. She leaped across a narrow gap, spinning to strike a holographic target, disarming the simulation with flawless precision. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Other students whispered anxiously, some in awe, some in disbelief. This human, without shields, without advanced weapons, was surviving the plasma gauntlet. Tovar spoke aloud, for all to hear. "You can't block plasma with steel." Mira's eyes met his. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her sword higher. The words were true. Steel could not block plasma, but a human could. She did not block the energy head-on. She redirected, she angled, she moved with timing that made every strike harmless. The final wave of drones activated. Pulses came from every direction, faster than anything she had faced. Mira felt the heat brush past her, but her sword angled each strike just enough to deflect the energy. Sparks flew around her like fireworks, illuminating her determined face. She moved with rhythm, almost as if she were dancing. Each strike was anticipated, each dodge precise. The drones fired relentlessly, but Mira's blade, mind, and body were in perfect harmony. One by one, the drones were neutralized. Not destroyed, but their attacks were rendered harmless by her skill and timing. The arena was filled with sparks, the air thick with smoke from plasma arcs. Mira stood in the center, breathing steadily, sword held high, her stance unbroken. The hall erupted in applause. Students cheered, some shouting in disbelief. "She did it! A human survived the gauntlet!" Instructor Tovar approached, stepping through the drifting sparks. His scales glimmered in the light. He looked at Mira carefully, studying her, assessing her skill. Slowly, he nodded, a rare gesture of respect. "Perhaps," he said softly, almost to himself, "humans are more capable than I imagined. Perhaps steel cannot block plasma, but a human can." Mira lowered her sword, a small smile on her face. She had survived the impossible. She had faced technology designed to be unstoppable and relied only on skill, instinct, and courage. Other students approached cautiously. Some bowed. Others shook her hand. "How did you do it?" a silver-skinned student asked. "No shield, no advanced weapon." Mira shrugged. "You study, you train, and you adapt. That is the human way. Technology is useful, but skill and intelligence can do what technology cannot." Tovar clapped his hands once. "This concludes the plasma gauntlet. Take note. All students, adaptability, creativity, and courage are as important as your weapons. And remember this, human. Mira Hale has proven that assumptions can be wrong." The academy buzzed with discussion long after the gauntlet ended. Students who had doubted humans now looked at Mira with respect. Some even envy. Others were curious, eager to learn her method, to understand how a steel sword could survive against plasma attacks. Mira returned to her dormitory. Her body tired, but her mind sharp. She placed her sword carefully beside her bed, reflecting on the day. She had trained for this moment. And her human method had worked. Angles, timing, anticipation, and instinct, these had been her weapons. Steel had been her tool, but her mind had been her true weapon. That night, as Mira gazed at the stars visible through the massive dormitory windows, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The plasma gauntlet was not just a test of strength or weapons, it was a test of ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. Humans, she realized, could thrive where others relied solely on technology. Somewhere in the academy, Instructor Tovar's voice echoed once more in her memory. "You cannot block plasma with steel." Mira smiled faintly, imagining his expression now. Respect replacing skepticism. The human method had been proven. And Mira Hale, standing alone among the galaxy's most skilled warriors, had begun to show that humans could overcome the impossible. Tomorrow, the Academy would hold new challenges, new simulations, and perhaps more difficult tests. But Mira was ready. She had survived the plasma gauntlet. She had demonstrated human skill, courage, and adaptability. And she knew that her journey was only beginning. The morning light filtered through the enormous windows of Axiom Academy, painting the training halls with a golden glow. Mira Hale stood at the edge of the arena, her steel sword resting across her shoulder. Today was not a test, not a drill, but the first day of her new role as an example for the Academy. The previous day, she had survived the plasma gauntlet, a feat that no human had ever attempted, let alone completed. Her name had spread quickly through the halls, whispered with awe and curiosity. Students and instructors alike now looked at her differently. The laughter and doubt were gone, replaced by respect and cautious admiration. Instructor Tovar approached, his golden eyes fixed on her. "Mira Hale," he said, voice steady but carrying weight. "Yesterday, you proved something extraordinary. You faced technology designed to overwhelm and destroy, and you did so with nothing but your skill, your mind, and a simple steel sword. That is remarkable." Mira inclined her head respectfully. "Thank you, instructor. I only did what humans have always done, adapt and survive." Tovar's lips curved into a rare smile. "Perhaps, in this academy, we have underestimated the human way. From now on, your methods will be studied and taught to those willing to learn." Mira's eyes widened slightly, not with pride, but with quiet determination. She had never sought fame. She sought understanding, respect, and the chance to show that humans could thrive even in the galaxy's most dangerous arenas. The first students approached, hesitantly at first. Many had watched her complete the gauntlet, and now they were eager to understand how a human could achieve what they thought impossible. "Can you teach us?" asked a small, winged alien, eyes wide with curiosity. Mira smiled. "I can show you the way I train. But remember, this is about more than the sword. It is about thinking ahead, predicting movements, and using what you have in ways others do not expect." Over the next few hours, Mira worked with small groups of students. She demonstrated angles, timing, and ways to redirect energy attacks without relying on shields or high-tech weapons. She showed them how observation, patience, and creativity could turn even a simple steel sword into a powerful tool against plasma and advanced weaponry. Some students struggled at first. Their instincts were tied to technology, not intuition. But Mira guided them patiently, encouraging practice and experimentation. Slowly, the first sparks of understanding appeared. By the end of the session, Even the most skeptical students were beginning to see the value in her methods. Later, during lunch, the Academy's dining hall buzzed with conversation. Students who had once laughed at the human were now speaking of her with respect. "She's incredible," one whispered. "A human, and she survived the gauntlet." "She doesn't just fight," another replied. "She thinks, and she teaches others to think too." Mira sat quietly at a table, eating her meal. She listened, but did not interrupt. Respect, she knew, was earned through actions, not words. That afternoon, Tovar called her to the arena again. "Mira, I have a proposition," he said. "The Academy wishes to implement a new program inspired by your performance. It will teach students not just to rely on technology, but to think, adapt, and overcome the human way." Mira nodded. "I am honored. I will help however I can." And so, a new course began at Axiom Academy, Human Adaptive Combat Techniques. Mira worked with instructors and students, sharing her training routines, her observations, and her philosophy. The course emphasized anticipation, creative thinking, and the effective use of simple tools against advanced technology. Over the next weeks, Mira's influence grew. Students who once doubted humans began to emulate her methods. Aliens trained with her techniques, learning to adapt when shields failed or when weapons misfired. Even Tovar, the stern instructor who had once laughed at her steel sword, now studied her methods carefully, integrating aspects into his lessons. Despite her rising reputation, Mira remained humble. She did not boast or seek attention. Her goal was simple: show that humans could survive, adapt, and thrive anywhere. Every student who learned from her, every successful training session, was proof that ingenuity and courage could be more powerful than any energy weapon. One evening, Mira stood on the training balcony, watching the Academy's sprawling grounds. The sun dipped below the artificial horizon, casting the halls in warm orange light. She thought back to the first day she arrived, the whispers, the doubts, the laughter at her steel sword. Now, she was no longer the newcomer. She was a teacher, a symbol, and a reminder that assumptions could be wrong. Tovar approached quietly. "You have done more than survive, Mira," he said softly. "You have changed this academy. You have shown that courage, creativity, and intelligence can be as powerful as technology." Mira smiled faintly. "I only did what humans have always done: adapt and learn. That is all." Tovar's eyes softened with respect. "Perhaps humans have more to teach us than I realized. Your example will remain long after this academy remembers the plasma gauntlet." Mira nodded. She did not need recognition. She had already accomplished what mattered, proving that humans could challenge assumptions, survive impossible odds, and inspire others to think differently. The academy halls were filled with whispers of her success. Students who had once doubted her sought her guidance. Instructors observed her lessons, taking notes. Mira's human method, the combination of observation, anticipation, and ingenuity, was slowly reshaping the culture of the academy. Weeks passed. Mira continued her training, both alone and with students. She refined her techniques, tested new strategies, and encouraged others to experiment. The academy, once focused solely on advanced technology and predictable patterns, now had a new focus: adaptability, creativity, and courage. One day, a new group of human exchange students arrived. They had heard of Mira Hale, the human who had survived the plasma gauntlet. Their eyes widened as they saw her in the training hall, steel sword resting on her shoulder, teaching aliens how to think differently in combat. "Is that—" "Yes," another replied. "The one who faced the gauntlet without shields or plasma weapons. They say she is changing the academy." Mira noticed the group and nodded. She did not speak, letting her actions speak for themselves. Soon, they would understand the human method, just as the alien students had. That evening, Mira returned to her dormitory, placing her sword carefully beside her bed. She reflected on everything that had happened, the doubts, the tests, the plasma gauntlet, and the students who had learned from her. Humans were often underestimated. Other species assumed weakness because humans lacked advanced weapons or natural advantages. But humans had something no machine, shield, or plasma weapon could replicate: adaptability, creativity, and courage. Mira had shown the Academy that a human could survive, thrive, and teach others to overcome the impossible. Somewhere in the Academy halls, Instructor Tovar's voice echoed in her memory. "You cannot block plasma with steel." Mira smiled faintly. "And her one, and people sends." That statement had been true. Steel alone could not block plasma, but a human, she knew, could do far more than block. A human could adapt, overcome, and inspire. The next day, as Mira walked through the corridors, students bowed, nodded, and even cheered quietly. She was no longer an outsider. She was a symbol, a teacher, and a reminder that intelligence and courage could challenge the strongest assumptions. Her sword rested at her side, simple and unassuming, yet powerful in the hands of one who knew its potential. Mira Hale had arrived at Axiom Academy as a newcomer. Underestimated and doubted, she had faced the impossible, survived the plasma gauntlet, and transformed an entire institution. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, and Mira knew she had only begun to prove what humans could do. One day, perhaps, the human method would spread far beyond the Academy, inspiring others across the stars. For now, Mira rested, steel sword by her side, proud not for herself, but for what she represented. Humans could face any odds, adapt, and thrive, even where others thought survival impossible. And so, the human who had once been laughed at, the one who raised her steel sword against unstoppable plasma, became a legend not because of technology, not because of strength, but because of courage, intelligence, and the indomitable human spirit.